Hello everyone. Today we're going to explore two films that, on the surface, may seem wildly different in tone and setting, but share something crucial in common. They both use black comedy to offer sharp critiques of social hierarchies, family dynamics, and class struggles. These films are Death at a Funeral, and at first glance, you might think these films are not connected. Death at a Funeral, directed by Frank Oz, is a British dark comedy centered around a chaotic funeral in a middle-class family. Meanwhile, Parasite, directed by Bong Joon-ho, is a South Korean film that blends humor with suspense and drama to tell the story of two families living in starkly different economic situations. But in both films, dark humor, defined as a comedic treatment of topics that are usually considered taboo, becomes a vehicle for social critique. They use absurdity, awkwardness, and irreverence to reveal deep truths about how class and power shape human relations. Let's dive into how both films employ black comedy to critique these issues within their respective cultural contexts. Let's start with social hierarchies. Both Death at a Funeral and Parasite aim how social status affects people's behaviors and interactions. In Death at a Funeral, we see a family that, on the surface, appears upper middle class, but as the funeral proceedings unfold, all of their flaws, insecurities, and class anxieties are exposed. The family members' reactions to the death of their patriarch highlight the absurdity of class distinctions as they're all struggling to maintain a sense of dignity. The comedy arises when we see how trivial social conventions, like keeping up appearances, become the focus of the family's interactions at the funeral. From the chaotic funeral service itself to the revelation of embarrassing secrets, the film uses humor to illustrate the ridiculousness of maintaining class-based power structures even in the face of death. In contrast, Parasite takes a more direct and nuanced approach to social hierarchies. The film explores the extreme disparity between the wealthy Park family and the struggling Kim family. What sets Parasite apart is its use of black comedy to reveal the fragility of class distinctions. The Kims, in their pursuit of better lives, infiltrate the Park family household, each member of the Kim family assuming roles within the Park's mansion. Here, the comedy isn't about the absurdities of the upper class like in Death at a Funeral. Instead, it's about how the Kim's deception, though darkly comedic, reveals just how easy it is to manipulate the social system. The Parks, despite their wealth, are blind to the very real but hidden social and economic inequality that surrounds them. The humor comes from how the characters navigate and exploit these rigid class distinctions, which are ultimately shown to be superficial and precarious. In both films, the use of black comedy exposes how social hierarchies are often built on fragile foundations, relying more on appearances and deception than genuine power. Now let's turn to the topic of family dynamics. Both Death at a Funeral and Parasite offer darkly comedic takes on the way family interacts, but in very different ways. In Death at a Funeral, the comedy stems from the dysfunction of the family itself. The patriarch's death is supposed to bring the family together, but instead it reveals deep-seated resentment, rivalry, and secrets. From a son's difficulty with his father's death, to Martha's struggle to keep her partner's secret, the family's inability to function properly at such a critical moment is both absurd and tragic. Black comedy here works by showing how family members use the funeral as an opportunity to assert power, control, and superiority over one another, even when faced with the most basic and human of events, the death of a loved one. In Parasite, family dynamics play a crucial role, but the focus is on the stark contrast between the Kim's tight-knit survival-driven family and the Park's more detached, luxurious family life. The Kims are constantly scheming to improve their living situation, and the film uses black humor to show how the Kim family's collective effort to infiltrate the Parks' household is both absurd and tragic. There is a comedy in how the Kims, despite their planning, are always one step away from disaster. The family dynamic here critiques the lengths to which the Kims must go to survive in a society that has so little regard for them. The Parks, by contrast, are oblivious to the reality of the Kims' lives. The way that they interact with their employees, especially their housekeeper, is detached and casual, showing a deep divide in how family and class are perceived across economic boundaries. Both films ultimately suggest that family dynamics are shaped by external pressures, especially class, and that these pressures often lead to dysfunction, manipulation, and dark humor as people struggle to maintain some semblance of power and dignity. Finally, we have the class struggles that underpin both of these films. Both films use black comedy to critique how society's class structure impacts individuals' lives and decisions. In Death at a Funeral, the class struggles are more subtle but are still present. The characters all belong to the same general middle-class demographic, yet they still navigate various levels of power, envy, and frustration, such as Robert being more successful financially and publicly compared to Daniel. The chaos that ensues at the funeral reveals the underlying tensions that exist even among people who share a similar social standing. There's a sense that for all their upper middle class status, these people are still subject to the same petty grievances, insecurities, and absurdities that also afflict the working class. The film uses dark humor to reveal how these societal distinctions can feel more oppressive than liberating. Parasite, on the other hand, is much more explicit in its portrayal of class struggle. The film's central conflict revolves around the Kim's family desperate desire to break free from poverty by infiltrating the Park's family's world. The class divide is stark, literally represented by the physical spaces that the two families both occupy. The Kims live in a semi-basement apartment, meanwhile the Parks live in a spacious and modern mansion. The dark comedy here arises from the Kims' underhanded tactics, such as tricking the Parks into hiring them for a variety of roles. The more the Kims succeed in infiltrating the Park household, the more absurd and uncomfortable the situation becomes, until the ultimate collapse reveals the horrors beneath the surface. The film doesn't just critique class inequality, it also critiques a system that upholds the inequality, using black humor to highlight the absurdity and danger of trying to transcend any class boundaries. To wrap up, both Death at a Funeral and Parasite use black comedy as a powerful tool to critique social hierarchies, family dynamics, and class struggles. Death at a Funeral focuses on the absurdities of class distinctions and the dysfunction of family interactions using dark humor to reveal the fragile nature of social standing, whereas Parasite takes a more intense, direct approach, using black comedy to expose the vast chasm between the wealthy and the poor and to critique the societal systems that perpetuate class inequality. What both films ultimately suggest is that social hierarchies and family dynamics are not just personal issues. They are shaped and constrained by the broader class structures in which they exist. By using black comedy, both films invite us to laugh at the absurdities of life while also making us think about the deeper, often uncomfortable truths of power, privilege, and inequality.